Melissa, what if I told you that after I did a heinous crime, I could wait 5 years and then just get a slap on the wrist?
So it would bring up some questions like if the committers of said heinous crimes were no longer allowed, do they deserve more of a punishment than it was already leveled out, as in losing their jobs, kind of, for some of them a little bit,
I
or going
mean,
somewhere else?
I guess it depends on whether or not they got other jobs
Yeah.
after they
Or
lost this one.
or were completely absolved of all guilt in their mind.
And key phrase, in their mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ladies and
It,
yeah. This is the Frogs of War podcast. I am Jamie Plunkett,
I am Melissa Treewasser.
and we are here with some hot sports opinions about the NCAA ruling that came down the day that we are recording this, 5 years later than it probably should have come down, and not to the liking of pretty much the entire college football community. I've never seen the college football landscape more united than in the NCAA ruling on Penn State, and now today the NCAA's ruling on Baylor.
Well, and listen, I think we're all in a place too of we realize how what's the word I'm looking for, where you think you have power but you actually have no power, that the NCAA is, right? Like they are the king without a throne. They're the emperor with no new clothes. We saw that as Texas and OU surprised everybody, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and then we saw it today with the feckless announcement of sanctions against Baylor, which, I mean, I have many opinions about this, that might be different than most people's opinions, but it's just a hilarious example of just what a waste the NCAA is as an organization at this point when it comes to college football.
Well, you're absolutely right. The college football, or really just the NCAA rules and regulations, were written and designed. The whole system and the whole structure was put in place to do a couple of different things: to make the NCAA money,
Mm-hmm.
and to make universities and institutions like that money,
Mm-hmm.
and to prevent the people doing majority of the work to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So my question becomes, now that we're paying student athletes, because we're essentially paying student athletes now with NIL, which I am totally here for, what is the purpose of the NCAA? Because they levied a $60 million fine back in the day on Penn State, and buku sanctions, like crazy scholarship restrictions, show cause for pretty much the entire coaching staff. They leveled Penn State's football program. It was a virtual death penalty. And then Penn State appealed and fought back, and it all got rescinded. And I think that truly paved the way for what happened in this Baylor situation. If you didn't know, today, as of this recording, if you're listening earlier this week, we'll call it, the NCAA finally came to its ruling on all of the issues that happened down in Waco during Art Briles' tenure there as head coach, the dozens on dozens of sexual assault cases and rape cases that went unpunished, essentially, because they were overlooked or swept under the rug, or whatever kind of colloquial phrase you want to use there. Several Baylor players are in prison now for a long time because of the things that they did on that campus. Several of the coaches that were at Baylor at that time are now coaching in other places, including most prominently Kendall Briles as an offensive coordinator in the SEC currently. The NCAA ruled on all of that today and essentially said, for the last 5 years we've been looking at all of this, and it is outside of our jurisdiction. So we're going to give Baylor 4 years of probation, which we don't know the details on that probation yet, and a $5,000 fine.
And then a couple of some small recruiting visits, official visit type things.
Some
Those were
small
thrown
sanctions on all that, some restrictions on all that kind of stuff. Essentially, what I gleaned from their commentary today was the lives of all of those women were only worth $5,000 in our mind, which is absurd and ridiculous and means that their priorities are wrong and that the system and the structure that they've built is not morally or ethically valuable, really, truly. It was really frustrating, honestly, to see that today. And I know that everybody listening to this is going to say, you're TCU people, so of course you're upset about it. You're also, if you're listening to this, probably a TCU person, so you're probably upset about it as well. But my argument is, if it was TCU that had done these things, I would have demanded a show cause for Gary Patterson for the rest of his life. I would have demanded that people be fired, that the program be penalized significantly by the NCAA, because there is no room for the things that happened in Baylor to ever happen, ever, regardless of circumstance or context or situation. And the more that we come down on that with harsh penalty, the less hopefully it will happen.
Well, and to me, that's the real issue here is I think a couple of things can be true. I think everything that you said, I 100% agree with, that this was really a slap in the face to the dozens of victims. But a couple other things I think also come into effect. Number one, it's always the question when these NCAA sanctions come down, is it fair to punish the people that are there now for something that 2 regimes ago happened? And I think that you can, if you even looking as, TCU fans, we can look at what Matt Rule did, and we can look at what Dave Aranda is doing and saying these men have come in and completely changed the culture around Baylor football. They've changed the character of the people involved with Baylor football. They have made a legitimate effort to come back from where they were and have not shied away from saying that, that was unacceptable. And the only person that really tried to defend Art Briles is now at LSU. So good luck with that, Kim. While also saying that, to me, the most troubling part of this is that the part of the reason they didn't more severely punish the football program is that they said that this was so rampant as the culture at Baylor University that Baylor football wasn't being given special exemptions. They were just doing what was happening across campus. And if you told me the NCAA had spent the last 5 years working with Baylor to assure that this wasn't going to happen again, to work on to make sure that they had the proper protocols in place and that the entire university's culture had changed, then I would say, don't punish them at all. To me, it's not about the punishment at this point. It's 5 years later. It's about making sure that these types of things don't happen on campuses across the United States, and that we take sexual assault seriously, and that we stop acting like football players are above the law, which we see happen time and time again all over programs in the country. And so was any change made? Like, that's what I want to see. I don't know that coming down, if they had decided to give Baylor the death penalty 5 years ago, I would have been all for it. 100% all in. But to come back 5 years later and level harsh penalties on a completely different Baylor football program, like, I don't want to say that I'm okay with that, because I'm not. I still don't think that Baylor was ever properly punished. But to me, the biggest oversight is not putting a show cause on all of the coaches that were involved in this in any way, shape, or form. That they should not be allowed to continue coaching young men, period. Like that to me is
1,000%.
Yeah, I don't care about anything else. Like, at this point, you're not punishing Art Briles and Baylor University's, the leadership that was there then. They've turned over everything to their credit. But you don't need to punish Dave Aranda for the sins of Art Briles, but you do need to make sure that Art Briles and everybody that was associated with him and everybody that enabled him never, ever gets the position of power ever again. And that didn't happen. And so that's, to me, is where I'm most upset. What happened with Baylor is what happened with Baylor. We've moved on, unfortunately, because that's what we do in this society, right? It's just a couple of dozen rapes. It's no big deal. But what happened to Art Briles has never been enough. And that, to me, is where I wish that we had seen harsher punishment come down today.
Yeah, I totally agree. I 100% agree with that sentiment. Ian McCaw was the athletic director at Baylor during all of this, and he is currently the athletic director at Liberty.
Yeah.
So why isn't he being punished for the stuff that he did then, right?
Because he's at Liberty.
Liberty, Liberty.
And they could not care less. I mean, Liberty is trying to be everything that Baylor was.
Liberty is its own bag of issues.
They would hire Art Briles in a heartbeat if they could.
They might now.
Yeah.
Right? They might now. But why, him being able to still hold a job where he influences student athletes and essentially is the governor of student athletes is a problem.
Yeah.
Kendall Briles being the offensive coordinator at Arkansas is a problem because he still has authority and power in a setting where he can allow student athletes to do the same things that they were doing at Baylor. And that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Allowing Art Briles to come back and coach football again would be a problem. And so I totally 100% agree that there should have been some sort of penalty levied against the people that were at Baylor during this time frame that are still, quote unquote, under the jurisdiction of the NCAA. Right? Bruce Pearl got a 5-year show cause for giving a kid a pizza, basically.
Yeah.
Boise State lost a recruit because he was homeless and fans did a fundraiser for him so that he could afford an apartment. That's the sort of stuff that the NCAA is levying major punishments against. And if we can levy punishments against people trying to give a kid a place to live because he legitimately doesn't have one, then we can say, hey man, you facilitated, or even if you didn't facilitate, you ignored dozens and dozens and dozens of sexual assaults on your campus. You can't be in a position of authority with student athletes anymore. That feels reasonable to me to make that next step. But the NCAA, I guess they were still afraid of the pushback that they got from Penn State. They lost that lawsuit, obviously. Maybe that's impacting their decisions today. I don't know. But either way, Baylor, as it currently stands, gets a slap on the wrist. I hear your argument for not punishing the program as it is today. I can buy into that for sure. I liked Matt Rule, as much as I hate to say it. He was a good guy. He was a good coach. He expected a lot from his kids. He did things the right way. And from all of the early returns that we've heard and seen, Dave Aranda is the same way. So yeah, I can get on board with that. But the people that were there at the prime of when all of this stuff was happening, they deserve to be punished more than they already have.
100%.
And you can say, well, maybe technically Art Briles has already served his show cause. He's been out of college football for 5 years. The dude was making money coaching football in Italy. Yeah. He's been coaching high school football in Texas for the last couple of years, and we all know, at least Texans do, how well that can pay. The guy hasn't really been that punished. And truly, the punishment should be you don't get to coach college football ever again.
You shouldn't coach football ever again. In my opinion.
Sure, but the NCAA, as far as the NCAA goes, they can only say, Art Briles, you can never coach football again. College football again. Kendall Briles, you can't coach college football anymore.
Yeah.
Ian McCaw, you cannot serve in an athletic director capacity. Right? That feels reasonable. Or Liberty's going to have to pay $1 million a year for you to be their athletic director.
Well, and that $1 million should go to support organizations that support victims of sexual assault. But, it's nothing. To me, the thing that's really frustrating is had they come out and said that a year after this all went down, I don't think there would have been that much pushback. I think everybody would have been like, no. Yeah.
I don't think the majority of Baylor fans would have been like, yeah.
Yeah, because he was gone out.
Even if that had happened today, the majority of Baylor fans would have been like, makes 100%.
Sense. They've moved on.
Should have happened years ago.
Yeah, they don't care. They've moved on. But
there's a small group of Baylor fans who are really, really stupid, and every school has a small sect of fans that are really, really stupid who still think in the hashtag CAB mentality.
Yeah.
But even if you talk to a mainstream, normal human being Baylor fan today, they will say that this punishment was a little too light insofar as it did not punish people that were involved in power at the time.
Well, and even those CAB #CAB people, they're busy. They're otherwise occupied, like showing up at school board meetings and stuff right now, aren't they?
Oh Jesus! It's Clay
Protesting
Travis.
outside of hospitals.
We're essentially
Yeah,
talking about Clay Travis
Clay
right now.
Travis. Yeah. But and I like I want to be really clear here. Like I still am fully for ejecting Baylor into the sun. Like obviously, like of course, like I don't want to act like I'm like I'm on team green and gold here. But at the same token, like I think that the NCAA here is where we should be directing our anger because they drug their feet for 5 years for no apparent reason. It's like they lost the document and then found it last week and went, "Oh shit, we got to do something about this, guys. $5,000, just give them $5,000."
It's like when you're in third grade and you walk up to your mom at 7:30 at night and you say, "Hey, mom, the science fair is tomorrow." Yeah. Oh, cool. Exactly. What have you done for your science project? I have a cup of dirt. Yeah. That's all I've got.
Give some baking soda and vinegar and we can do a volcano.
Shout out to Brian Regan. If you haven't heard his stand-up bit about Cup of Dirt, go listen to Cup of Dirt. What do you have here, Brian? Oh, it's a cup of dirt. Well, will you explain it to me? Well, you see, it's a cup.
We now have JB is repeating stand-up things. That's we know it's probably time to change topics, right?
YouTube, Brian Regan, Cup of Dirt. Okay. It's worth your time. My question, though, based on all of this, because obviously TCU, from a conference realignment perspective, is in a relatively precarious position right now. And we are a TCU podcast, so if we're going to spend the first 15 minutes talking about Baylor, there should be a tie-in to the university that you and I both attended.
Fair.
My question is, does the kind of research... For the last 5 years, we've hashed and debated all of this stuff out. And for the last 2 years, especially since Rule left and went to Carolina, and now Dave Aranda is there as the head coach for the last season, all of that stuff is kind of faded into the background, into the past. Now that it's resurfacing... and it's resurfacing in a way that essentially says, hey, Baylor, you got away with all of it. What does that do to Baylor's value from a conference realignment perspective? And based on reports that we've seen earlier this week where TCU and Baylor and Texas Tech have really been talking about themselves as potentially a package deal, what is that? How does Baylor's perceived value with the resurfacing of all this stuff impact TCU, impact Texas Tech, impact this potential relationship with the Pac-12, and so on and so forth?
Well, here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that Jeremiah Donati picked up a few things from his pal, Chris Del Conte, before Del Conte took off out of town, and that he is doing the slick car salesman act that did CDC so well for so many years of his career and continues to do so. And that Jeremiah Donati is a smart man. I think he is. And that he's going down to Texas politicians and saying, look what's happening to Texas schools. Look at all three of these Texas schools that are going to get screwed over by UT Texas politicians. This is going to impact you and your voting base and jobs in your region. And then he's going to the Pac-12 and saying, I don't give a flying F about those other two guys. This is about TCU and TCU only. I think, and listen, like I'm going to tell you, if I'm West Virginia and the AC, I'm having conversations with the ACC that are very different than the conversations I'm having with the irate 8 or whatever you want to call the leftovers, right? And if I'm Kansas and Iowa State, and then I am calling the Big Ten every week and saying, we got that AAU designation. Hey, Iowa State, we're number 8 in the preseason poll. Don't you want to take a look at us? And then going back to Bob Bowlesby and saying, we are all in with the Big 12. And I'm hoping Donati is doing the exact same thing with the Pac-12. And that he's saying, listen, if my best bet is to stick with these two schools in Oklahoma State and we're a package deal because you want 4, then I'm going to align myself. But the minute that you tell us, hey, we're not really interested in Baylor is out the door. And I'm fairly certain that's what's happening. I mean, you play the hand that you're dealt. And look, all the Texas fans that have been hanging out on our website, because apparently they have nothing better to do, telling us you do the exact same thing in your situation. Now that you put us in this situation, it's every man for themselves. And I think that's what everybody's doing, is that they're going to give the illusion of sticking together, because that right now is what's best for the conference. And we're all still a part of the conference. But the minute that the conference officially dissolves, which could happen any moment now, then you gotta go every man for themselves. Fend for yourself, man. It's not women and children to the lifeboats. You gotta just jump on and start paddling and hope for the best. And if any other school does that to us, I'm gonna have zero problem with us. The landscape has changed. Do what's best for your university. Find your best deal, and if that means flying out solo, then that's what you got to do.
You heard Melissa say it. It's not just women and children to the lifeboats. It's everybody jump in and start paddling. I fully agree with that. You got to do what's best for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Texas argument towards TCU fans at this point has been, why would you be mad at Chris Del Conte for doing his job well? I don't think any TCU fan is mad at Chris Del Conte for doing his job well. I think we're hoping that, just like you said, Donati has taken a leaf out of his former boss's book and is going to be doing the exact same thing for TCU.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if TCU ends up in the Pac-12, ends up kicking ass in that division, in that conference for a few years, and maybe sees Texas in the college football playoff. No, that won't happen. Maybe sees Texas in the Alamo Bowl because that's as far as Texas is ever going to go in the SEC. Then we'll be all right with that.
Yeah.
But I totally agree. Like I do think that Baylor wishes this ruling had come 3 years ago, simply because this is going to be a topic of conversation now for Baylor when they're trying to get into another conference. And I think it would be in TCU's best interest right now, if not 2 weeks ago, to say, yeah, I mean, if they come with us, they come with us, but ultimately we're going to do our own thing.
Well, and I'll add this to it. I think today's ruling didn't change anything for Baylor. I think that everybody outside of Baylor University and the Big 12, who just has kind of had to live with it for the last couple of years, still looks at Baylor and goes, "Yeah, I don't know about those guys."
Do you think we're just numb to it because we see them every year?
I really do, because I think that when you live in proximity with something, that you learn to accept it, right? Because you can't necessarily change it in some ways. But then I also think that the rest of the country watches what Baylor has done and the way that they've responded, the way that they've acted things. And then also, especially if you're talking about the Pac-12, looks at some of the language in their student handbooks that is very anti-LGBT and goes, yeah, I don't know about those guys. Sure. I'm not really picking up what they're putting down. So, obviously, I think that there's football culture in parts of this country that overwhelms sometimes moral compasses. And that's why Baylor got away with what they did. And that I think that if you're not embroiled in that culture necessarily, then you still kind of have this weird taste in your mouth for Baylor. But I say that, and then also they are setting records for applications every year. Their applications aren't only coming from in-state. So maybe everybody is just kind of, distance makes the heart grow fonder when it comes to what Baylor has been through and what happened 5 years ago anymore.
I mean, you talk about distance makes the heart grow fonder. Look at the trajectory of their basketball program over the last 20 years.
Right?
Yeah.
And I didn't hear anybody talking about Patrick Dennehy, last March or April or whenever that was. And I guess, that's kind of goes back to my earlier point though, is how long do you punish people for something that they weren't directly a part of? You can look at the culture of that university and say, there's clearly some issues here. And it's hard to believe that those issues have changed. But at the same token, you have across the board now that Kim Mulkey is gone, really people of really high character in all of your major programs. Like, do I like Scott Drew? No. Do I think he's a bad human being? Unfortunately, no, I don't. Like, I wish I did. Mm-hmm. But I think when you just look at the people that they've instilled in positions of leadership, from the athletic director, the president to the head coaches of the major sports, like, it looks like they're trying on sub level to at least give the appearance of doing the right thing. It hurts me to say this. I feel like I'm defending Baylor, and I don't feel good about that at all. But there's only so much you can punish somebody for something that they specifically didn't do, I guess. And that's where the NCAA once again has just really failed us.
I totally agree. The structure that they built was so narrow and so focused on one singular issue ultimately, which was preventing people from making money that weren't them. Mm-hmm. That their jurisdiction is equally narrow, which is why ultimately I firmly believe that at some point, if it's not already there, college football and essentially college basketball too are going to outgrow the NCAA to the point where, all of those folks in that office building in Indianapolis are going to be out of a job because college football and college athletics generally will have moved on.
Yeah,
to a certain extent.
We're gonna see it when in the next round of realignment. Mm-hmm. Just no doubt in my mind that the NCAA is that we're seeing the SEC gather teams the way that they are so that they can break off from the NCAA ultimately. Like, I think that's ultimately the goal.
It'll be kind of like a EPL Super League situation where
Yeah.
all that stuff's going down. But anyways, let's take a quick break. We've spent a lot of time on this. We've hashed it out now, but we promised you all, valued listeners, that we would talk about TCU's defense today, which is always a very good topic of conversation if you're a TCU fan. So we're going to take a quick break, #ad, and then we will be back to break down what TCU's defense could possibly look like this fall. All right, we are back. Melissa.
Like we never left.
Like we never left. For those of you that don't know, we literally just sit here for like an extra 5 seconds after that break happens, and then I add it in post edit. And so we do this. It's like I take an extra sip of my beer. Melissa does what she does, tells a dog to stop barking or whatever it might be, and
and we move myself
right along.
So I can cough. Yeah,
absolutely. So before we get into the defensive preview, though, I did technically lie because I saw you added something on the run sheet, and I do think we should talk about it because there are two Horned Frogs in particular who are absolutely 100,000% lighting the F up in the summer league for the NBA right now. That would be Desmond Bane and RJ Nembhard. Desmond Bane dropped, I believe, 32 points in the most recent Memphis Grizzlies Summer League game.
Before Wednesdays.
Before Wednesday's game, he dropped 32 points. He was lights out. RJ Nembhard off the bench with 18 points in the Miami Heat's first Summer League game of the season. Yeah, it's Summer League. Yeah, it's a lot of guys that are just trying to make rosters and all that stuff, but who the hell cares if TCU players... I mean, Dez has a spot in Memphis, but RJ coming out and being the leading scorer on Miami's team when they bring in... They didn't have a draft pick this year. They signed, I think it was 6 guards as undrafted free agents trying to bolster their roster in the guard position. And to come out and be the leading scorer off the bench, 18 points, have 4 rebounds, a couple steals, really looking good. You got to be happy and proud for RJ after something like that.
Yeah, and it was really fun because they played each other Wednesday, the Heat and the Grizzlies, in this NBA Summer League out in Vegas. And so it was fun to see Desmond Bane and RJ Nembhard on the same court again, matching up with each other a little bit. And I did watch most of the first half and didn't pay attention to much of the second. RJ wasn't quite as sharp today shooting the ball. He had a few more turnovers, didn't shoot quite as well. And Bane had for him a little bit of an off night, and then he only put up 16 points. But
shame.
Yeah, for shame. It's really because I think, Memphis drafted a pretty good small forward. They've added some interesting guards too in free agency. They've changed their roster around quite a bit. They've gotten rid of some guys. And I think what Bane is doing here is really solidifying himself, not just as a contributor on a potential playoff team, but as a go-to guy. And, when they let JJ Redick go, I think that was a big vote of confidence. Not JJ Redick, who's the other, Grayson Allen. Thank you. Yep. Yeah. If you guys didn't see, if you're not watching, JB just gave me a look and I knew immediately that I was wrong.
JJ Redick was a former Dallas Maverick as of
he played in Dallas this year.
They traded for him at the trade deadline, and then he played 3 games because he was hurt the whole time.
Yeah, there you go. So Grayson Allen, I mean, they're both annoying white guys from Duke, right? It's
same. Easy to make the confusion.
It's easy to make. Yeah, they're both kind of cheap shot players. JJ's at least funny on Twitter though.
And he's got a great podcast.
And it's a good podcast. So they basically gave him the summer league team and said, go be awesome. And that's what he's done. It's been really fun just to watch him perform at a high level. His highlights have been all over social media. He's doing some really great things. I think he has a chance with a much healthier Grizzlies team this fall to be a really elite bench player that can light it up in a hurry. And I think RJ has shown enough to get a 2-way contract. If not with the Heat, with somebody else. This guy will definitely make the G League. He's definitely displayed what we saw him do at TCU, and that he can score. He can fill it up from 3 different levels in the basketball court. So I think a lot of people questioned RJ's decision to leave early. And I understand why you would question that, but also this poor kid had been in college for 5 years already and or 4 years or whatever it was. And I think that he knew he had a chance to play professionally somewhere, and it's looking like he's going to get a chance to make a G League team. And I think he'll work his way into an NBA roster over the next 2 or 3 years.
I totally agree with that. I mean, if you're RJ Nembhard and you see one of your best friends on the team, Desmond Bain, go to the NBA the year prior and find great success, your other best friend on the team, Kevin Samuel, is transferring out or maybe going to the NBA or doing something else, you have the choice to either try with the hand that you've got to make it in the NBA, two-way contract, G League, whatever it might be, or learn the names of like 12 new people.
Yeah.
And rarely does anyone in any circumstance want to learn the name of 12 new people. But once you've been at an institution for 5 years already, that's not something that really is interesting. I cannot blame him for a single second for doing what he's done. And now he's showing people who asked all of those questions that he did make the right call for himself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He's got a chance to do. And I do want to, like, I think we should touch on too the scheduling news as long as we're talking TCU basketball. I, for one, am glad that we're playing a bunch of pansies, lower division schools in November in Southern California. I think it's a great decision. I think pad those stats and pad that schedule, Jamie Dixon, like 100%. You've got a bunch of guys who don't know each other, who haven't played together, who all have come from different places. Take them to the beach for the week.
So for those of you that don't know, TCU announced on Wednesday of this week that they're playing in the inaugural SoCal Challenge November 22nd and 24th in San Juan Capistrano, California. They are playing in a pool of teams that includes
Cal Poly,
and Pepperdine and
Fresno
State. I'm looking at the email from Stephen Schoen, and it doesn't have all the teams listed.
Santa Barbara or someone. It's bad. I love it.
But anyways, it's a bunch of teams that TCU can pretty easily handle.
Hopefully.
Even with a roster of completely new faces. And so I am all for Jamie Dixon padding the win column. I'm all for Jamie Dixon providing an opportunity early in the season for all of these guys that have transferred in, plus Mike Miles, essentially, plus a very ripped and jacked now Eddie Lampkin.
Eddie, I want your
nowhere.
Tell me how you did it, buddy. I want to know how you dropped 60 pounds.
I might actually respond to Steven's email and just say, who personally is training Eddie Lampkin, and can I pay him like $50 to just give me some pointers? Because holy cow. But the reality is like, I think with RJ leaving too, this gives Dixon the opportunity to really fully, completely reconstruct the offense around Mike Miles and Micah Peavy, which is going to be, and we can do a basketball preview way down the road. I've got a lot of thoughts. I'm actually super bought into this iteration of TCU basketball. We'll get into it down the road. But I think that if you really, truly give Mike Miles the opportunity to be the guy, this dude's going to take you places. And to set him up with a tournament early on that maybe doesn't have the big names, but provides him an opportunity to get his footing, understand how the dudes around him play, find a rhythm, find some momentum, that can do wonders for a basketball team.
Well, and also,
I'll go for it.
I was going to say, just let him drop 40 points and make SportsCenter against Cal Poly. Sure. Right? Like that's great for your program.
Because then you're not only talking about Mike Miles of TCU dropping 40, you're saying, oh yeah, and don't forget, this is where Desmond Bain went to school.
Yeah.
This is where RJ Nembhard went to school.
Yep.
And this is where Kenrich Williams went to school. Because lest we forget, Kenny Hustle is still doing big things in the NBA. And so there's, for all of his faults and for all of the questions that we've asked regarding Jamie Dixon's late game coaching and recruiting and why are all of these guys transferring in and out, and I know I've been a very public person asking a lot of those questions, there is a track record of success now in some ways for Jamie Dixon.
Sure.
We would prefer to see that track record of success also play out on the basketball court and in the Big 12 standings. And maybe that comes this year. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, if nothing else, like I just want to see Micah Peavy and Mike Miles on the floor together cooking.
Yep.
Like that to me, like that's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Like as a halftime show, they get a Blackstone out there and cook, or. Okay. Anyways, moving. It was a good joke.
Hey guys, that's been the Frogs of War podcast.
It has not. We have to talk about TCU defense. Let's go. TCU defense. Obviously, TCU started fall practice. Melissa has walked away completely. No, she is not. If
Gone.
you're watching on YouTube, you
I
can
want
tell
to.
she's still here.
I
She's
want to.
tethered by her headset. Shout out Audio Technica, by the way. Not a
Yeah.
sponsor of the show, but maybe
But you could
someday.
be.
Maybe
Yeah.
someday. Hashtag ad. TCU's defense is replacing a few key players, has a few studs, but ultimately is in, I think, Melissa, a great position to be one of the better defenses TCU has seen since 2014, the Rose Bowl year, some of these kind of premier iterations of Gary Patterson's defense. And it all starts with cornerbacks, as it always does for TCU's defense. The two dudes on the field out of the 11 that are mostly left on an island, required to lock down whoever is in front of them. TCU has two of the best in the country. Trey Hodges-Tomlinson, Noah Daniels. Not to even mention Keon Stewart, who is fully healthy and back from an injury last year. Not to even mention CJ Caesar, who struggled to get his footing in the first couple of games and then came away with 3 interceptions down the road in the season. This cornerback unit specifically is arguably the best set of 1s and 2s in college football. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, listen. Like, I hate to do this to Noah, and if he listens, which I do believe Noah listens and reads to every single thing I've written about him, and I love him for it.
I love Noah Daniels.
I love him so much.
I've said this every episode of the
Yeah,
podcast. I've
same
been
one.
a Noah Daniels stan since he got on campus, and
Yeah,
I
for
will
sure.
not quit Noah Daniels. I
No.
will never quit him.
And I hate that it comes down to this, but I'm going to say it again. We're going to say it 100 times this season. If Noah Daniels is healthy, TCU has a chance to have a better secondary than they did a year ago, despite the fact that 2 of their safeties are in the NFL. 100%. Because
and it's weird that it's not even really a question.
yeah. I mean, to me, there's two things that have to happen. Noah has to stay healthy. That's number one, right? Like that. And we can say that because he hasn't. And again, like, it's not his fault. I'm not saying this dude isn't doing everything to prepare himself for the season. He's just had some really bad luck. The other thing is this is where I'm really glad that Trey Hodges-Tomlinson is the nephew of LaDainian Tomlinson, because you see a lot of young guys get this kind of hype in the preseason, get this kind of attention, have everybody talking to them. And if I was Trey Tomlinson, I would be on the phone with every single NIL opportunity, accepting everything. You would see me all over social media. And we have not seen a whole lot from Trey. And that to me makes me assume that he is 100% focused on the season. He's got great counseling from somebody who's been on the mountaintop and what he wants to do in life, who is probably telling him, all of these accolades mean nothing in July and August. They got to mean something in December. And he knows if he performs the level that people are giving him credit and expecting him to, that he's going to be a first or second round draft pick come April. And so if Trey keeps his head on straight, which sounds like by all accounts he is, and if Noah stays on the field, and you're telling me my third and fourth guy are Keon Stewart and CJ Caesar, both of whom have played meaningful snaps in important football games, feeling pretty damn good about the cornerback situation in a way I haven't almost ever with TCU football. Like, these are 2 really, really talented guys that have more talent on paper than anybody we've seen at the position heading into a season.
I fully agree with what you just said. I have one reason why I think Trey Tomlinson is going to hands down be the, at worst, second best cornerback in college football this season. And if he's second best, it's because Noah Daniels stayed healthy. Did you see the picture that he tweeted of himself on August 9th?
Holy cow.
That dude has been in the gym. Don Summer got his hands on Trey Tomlinson and turned him into a freaking... Okay, phrasing. Rewind the last 15 seconds. Don Summer has been in the gym with Trey Tomlinson and has helped him craft himself into a fully fledged, monstrous beast of a human being. Trey Tomlinson is jacked. Trey Tomlinson is still fast as all get out. All reports are that the dude is hungry as hell still. This guy is going to... For having an uncle who is a Hall of Fame NFL football player, the hype around him, I feel like isn't where it should be.
Hmm.
Like a lot of times when you talk about legacies, the hype is way more than the talent of the player. And a lot of times that's father son situations, right? Like we've been hearing about Zaire Wade since he was born. We've been hearing about LeBron James' oldest son since he was like 4 years old. We all have been hearing about Tiger Woods' son. He's only 11 now, and he eagled like some hole in a tournament that was a pro-am thing a couple months ago, whatever. Right? Like the hype is always there, and then sometimes those next generation guys don't quite achieve the hype. I feel like it's the inverse for Trey Tomlinson, where there should be national hype around how good this guy is.
Mm.
And other than Pro Football Focus, nobody's really talking about him a whole lot. And
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
think that does TCU a huge favor because Gary can come in and say, "Look, man, I know you're one of the best at what you do. You know you're one of the best at what you do. But it seems like everyone else is still missing out on the fact that you're the best at what you do. So now it's time to go and earn that money and show everyone else that you're the best at what you do." And we might see a totally new level of Trey Tomlinson this year that we have not yet seen. And that should be absolutely terrifying for opposing offensive coordinators.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If he handles his business on the field the way that we know he's capable of, and Noah Daniels handles his business on the field, and you find two good safeties, not great, good, and then the pass rush can get to the quarterbacks like we expect them to. It's a lot of if thens, but if these things all come together, then yeah, you're looking at a potentially elite defensive unit in a conference where
Mm-hmm.
you have to have one just to hold teams under 30 anymore. It looks like at the top, at least the good teams, because it is pretty loaded at the quarterback position coming into 2021 this fall.
Absolutely. And speaking of safeties, obviously TCU is replacing not just two safeties, but Ardarius Washington, who was incredible in 2019, had somewhat of a tough 2020. And then the Thorpe Award winner, Trayvon Merrick, who is now an Oakland Raider second round pick. Sorry, Las Vegas Raider. Second round pick to Vegas. God.
Hmm.
Imagine
Yeah.
if the Las Vegas Raiders had to recruit people. Like, come on.
Oh, kill it.
Come on.
Absolutely kill it.
Everybody wants to get drafted and go to Vegas, right?
Right.
So you're replacing two safeties. Obviously, you've got LaKendrick Van Zant, who's kind of the stalwart, still there guy at safety for TCU this year. And then there's a competition at the other two spots. You've got, I would say maybe, oh gosh, I don't know, 5 names that are really competing for those other two spots.
Mm-hmm.
All reports out of the first week of camp are that Bud Clark and, oh my gosh, who am I thinking? Deshaun McQuinn are both kind of really vying for that free safety spot. Like that's two dudes who are really getting after it. One of them is probably going to be the starter. The other is probably going to be the 2 deep. And then on the other side of things, you've got Memphis transfer TJ Carter, who played corner in Memphis for the last few years. Gary transferred him in, immediately moved him to safety, who's probably going to be your third starter on the field this year. But you've still got Nook Bradford coming back with some incredible experience. You've got Josh Foster, his
Mm-hmm.
4th year in the system now as a junior, coming in with some really, really good experience. Mike, can we talk about Yo-Yo for a second
Oh God, I want him to stay healthy
as
so bad
well?
this year.
Michael Onyemeobi, who, if you don't know his name, I would highly, highly encourage you to familiarize with this kid. He committed to TCU, came here as a freshman. Correct me if I get this story, the timeline wrong. Came in as a freshman, suffered was it either his senior year or his freshman year at TCU?
I think it was his freshman year on special
I
teams,
think
like the
so.
first punt return of the season or something.
He suffered a horrifying leg injury that essentially like 95% of people don't walk again from more or less play football again after they've had this injury. And he has spent the last 3 years of his life rehabbing, having multiple surgeries, rehabbing more, getting strength back in the leg, rehabbing more, and he's out there on this football team, running with the third string team, playing really good football. And so I don't think Mike O, a lot of people call him Yo-Yo. I don't think we see him playing for TCU football in a meaningful game. But that's the kind of guy who, even from the sideline, can wildly impact the mentality of a defensive unit. For him to be able to look at those guys and be like, I worked my ass back from a devastating leg injury just to be here on the sideline today. Get your ass out there and do your job. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of leadership in a positional locker room that can do incredible things for a unit that is already, like, TCU fans have insanely high expectations for safeties every year. So don't count out Yo-Yo.
And I will say that he's someone that Patterson specifically mentioned competing for a rotational spot in the safety position. I don't know that he's going to ever start a game for TCU, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see him on the field. And just to confirm, he came here, he redshirted his first year. He got hurt against Southern in the opener of his redshirt freshman season. Has not played since. This is also a guy, like, I think he's either married or engaged. He has a kid. So there's definitely like some maturity about him that I think does definitely lend an air of experience to the team. And I think what you said is that on whether or not he ever plays a meaningful snap for TCU is irrelevant. He has battled through so much, fought through so much just to be a part of this program, and has stuck it out at TCU despite the fact that he's a California native. Like, he could have gone home so many times, but he stayed. He's been committed to the program, and you can tell that he wants to be here at TCU and he wants to win, and he wants to have a chance to compete. So I hope that he gets on the field and that he's healthy enough to do so. I think that would be awesome.
It would be incredible if he saw playing time. I would there would be the short list of people who have come back from an injury like this. Like, it would be overwhelmingly incredible to see him play for TCU and get on the field and experience some of that time. That would be awesome.
For sure. Yeah.
Nonetheless, though, the takeaway from looking at TCU's safety group going into 2021, obviously there are always going to be questions when you lose 2 starters out of 3 positions. When one is a Thorpe Award winner, the questions compound. But the depth that TCU had last year and what that translates into for 2021, with guys like Bud Clark and Nook Bradford and Deshaun McQuinn and Josh Foster, TJ Carter coming in, like, the talent is there. And we had a similar conversation last week too with the offensive side of the ball, talking about wide receivers specifically, like teams that have what they perceive as depth in a position group will talk a lot about potential talent. Now it's all about that potential talent, or as Gary Patterson would call it, paper tigers, bearing out in a positive way on the field. And so when we see these guys, and if they actually perform to the level that we think that they can perform to, that's going to be a wonder for everybody to see.
Well, and here's the other thing too that I love. Those safeties are going up against those wide receivers. Those corners are going against those wide receivers every single day. Mm-hmm. And when you have that much talent and that much depth on both sides of those 2 positions, you're making each other better every time out. And I think that's something TCU hasn't been able to do the last 3 seasons. And Patterson touched on that Thursday too. And just that, like, his ones are getting to go against his ones. It's not his ones going against his threes like it was for so much of last season with all the COVID protocols.
Absolutely. And when you add in the fact that he thinks he's got the deepest core of wide receivers that he's had since the Doxson and Listenby years, that means that you have genuine talent going on genuine talent. Mm-hmm. And it's an iron sharpens iron situation at that point. Mm-hmm. The more that I look into TCU football in 2021, the more I am Michael Scott sitting behind his desk. I am completely ready to get hurt again.
Yeah, I'm so ready for the pain. I believe so much.
Fully ready to be injured by this team. Mm-hmm. We've talked about secondary. We've talked about corners and safeties a little bit. Speaking of someone who can injure you physically, Melissa, or me, D. Winters, We talked about Trey Tomlinson's physical transformation. Uh, okay, I want to pause. Side note, I did think about putting into the show notes for today, like physical transformation of Trey Tomlinson, physical transformation of D Winters, because these are two dudes who you can just tell when they're posting pictures on Twitter and Instagram have gotten bigger in the off season. Like they've put in the work in the gym. I also am very cognizant of the time that I was sitting in a post-game press conference and for TCU basketball, and Desmond Bane came out, and obviously we all know that Desmond Bane is kind of known for how like
Popeye arms,
how defined his biceps are. And the first question was, it was like it might have just been like a preseason workout press conference situation, and someone's like, Desmond, can you talk to us about how fit you are? Like that was essentially the gist of the question, was tell us, like, why are you in such good shape to the point of being like more in shape visibly than everybody else that plays your sport? And Desmond was just like, that's a weird question, man. Right? So
okay.
I'm fully aware that I am infringing on that territory by talking about the physique of Trey Tomlinson and D Winters, but here I go with my little pack. I am on this road now. Good. Hang on. There we go. Nope, my microphone messed up.
Uh-oh, are we no longer recording audio? Because
no, it's still
that seems
going.
to be one of our favorite things.
There
it's
it
just
goes.
Not working. Yeah.
No, it defaulted to.
As you talk about, physiques, and we talk about D Winters, and we talk about Travius Hodges Tomlinson, I also think we need to just throw into the conversation a third, because Gary Patterson called him the most well put together linebacker in the country, in Jamoy Hodge. And having seen pictures of him on Twitter,
he's a monster.
He looks like a linebacker.
He's a monster. Here's the thing about, so for so many years, TCU linebackers have had, the priority has been speed over size, which makes sense when you only have two linebackers on the field, and they have responsibilities that are a little bit different than if you have 3 or 4 linebackers on the field. It feels like in 2021, TCU finally has 2 linebackers who are fully capable of checking that quote-unquote size box.
Yeah. And
you have not in the slightest sacrificed any speed.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about 2 linebackers who were both over like 6'1", 6'2", 230, 235. Like that's still that might even still be a little bit undersized for a college linebacker. But that's not undersized by any stretch of the imagination to the extent that TCU linebackers normally are. Like people think of Garrett Wallow and Ty Summers, and they're like, TCU has had big linebackers in the past. That's 2 examples. Stephen Hodge was like 220 pounds in his prime.
Yeah.
Like the normal TCU linebacker is like 6 foot flat, 220.
Yeah, so and runs a 4.4.
And as fast as all get out, but they're not that big, and these are big dudes that are going to be standing in the center of TCU's defense this year.
Yeah, and they're big dudes that, like you said, don't sacrifice speed, but that also really have a great understanding of the playbook. D Winters is 100% ready to come in and take over the leadership role that Garrett Wallow is vacating as he goes to the Texans. Mm-hmm. He's not the vocal guy that Garrett Wallow is, but also if you've heard Garrett Wallow talk, nobody vocally is Garrett Wallow. God, I miss him so much.
I do too.
I miss him already, but I'm really excited. Oh, I can't even. And only allow Billy Wessels to do the Garrett Wallow accent, but yeah, I think I'm excited to see Hodge slide in, because you look at some of the other options back there, and you've got Wyatt Harris and you've got some other guys that are capable of playing in the position. But if Jamoy Hodge lives up to his billing, if he can slide in, he's ready, he knows the playbook. That dude just physically is imposing, and I think that a D Winters Jamoy Hodge linebacking unit is pretty damn tight, pretty tough for opposing offenses. And when you look at the running backs that are going to be playing in the Big 12 this year, linebacker becomes an incredibly important position. So I'm putting together an article that'll hopefully be up by the end of this week on Hodge and just kind of his role and his transformation. But he's a guy that I think that TCU fans need to make sure that they know his name, because we're going to hear a lot of him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hodge and Winters are the 1 and 2 of TCU linebackers this year. Also, though, Wyatt Harris has, by all accounts, really performed well. It's not necessarily that Jamoy Hodge has stepped into this number 2 role for a lack of competition, but that he has outperformed another very good linebacker in Wyatt Harris.
Yeah.
And you've also got another Texas A&M transfer, Shadrack Banks, who's coming in and has been running with the twos at linebacker. Who he was a wide receiver transfer from Texas A&M. There's a lot of content around the linebacker transfer from LSU that now plays wide receiver for TCU, and the wide receiver transfer from Texas A&M that now plays linebacker for TCU. Situation that is happening this year for the Frogs. But Shadrack Banks is like 6'2", 250, and he has come in and immediately grasped what the coaches need from him at linebacker. He's extraordinarily athletic. All reports are that he has been running with the twos and finding a lot of success. And so it looks like, even though TCU football is replacing Trey Merrick and Ardarius Washington and Garrett Wallow, like they are primed for another incredibly solid defensive season with these guys that are just going to kind of step up and keep the ball rolling. It is really, if there's anything about Gary Patterson's legacy that I think will stick with me when we finally get to that point where all of Patterson is in the past, it's the fact that he has churned out so many incredible defensive talents, and the question is always, shit, we've got to replace this guy. Oh, we've got to replace that guy. Oh, this dude just went to the NFL in the first round. Like, what are we gonna do? And it's like TCU defense never misses a beat. There were a couple years there where it was a little down from what it normally is, but it really truly never misses a beat.
Well, and the thing that's been so interesting too is for so long he was doing that with guys who were like 1-star running backs or played quarterback at a high school you had never heard of, and now he's getting 4-star talents. And if this is the year where the recruited talent starts meeting out success on the field, then it's a total game changer for TCU football, especially defense, because where you could take a bunch of dudes who, had never suited up on that side of the ball and turn them into NFL players. Imagine what you can do with guys who have been working at this their entire lives and were being recruited by blue chip programs across the country. If this is the year, then like I said, I think that both sides of the ball, that the talent is like we've never, ever seen at TCU. And if that plays out into wins, it's going to be a really fun season.
Yeah, and the same thing applies when you talk about defensive line, which is the last unit that we're going to talk about on this episode. You've got O'Shawn Mathis, you've got Kahari Coleman, and all the reports the first week, you talk about those two guys and you think, oh, well, Kahari Coleman, he was a Big 12 freshman of the year, freshman All-American, all these other things. Like, the dude had an insane first year on the football field, and all of the talks are, oh, well, he's on the 2 deep right now. He's second string because a transfer linebacker has come in from New Mexico, Dylan Horton. He's had a year under the program now, and he's kind of passed Coleman on the depth chart for defensive end. And it's not that Coleman has taken a step back or that he's struggling or whatever else it might be. It's just that, no, Dylan Horton is here now, and he's ready to freaking go. And so
this is what I want to say about Dylan Horton. So I was only, because of all the COVID protocols, I was only on the field for one game last year as a photographer. And that game was the final game of the season, Louisiana Tech game. And at one point I was in the end zone and I remember looking up and seeing this man. And I was like, what is this giant human being doing on the field? Why have I never seen him before? Who is he? And it was Dylan Horton. And I swear to God, he's 7'3". He weighs 330 pounds. He has 2% body fat. I have never seen a physical, and mind you, he was standing next to O'Shawn Mathis and made O'Shawn Mathis look like a perfectly normal-sized human being. And I just remember, I don't know who this guy is, but I want to make sure that I know who this guy is going into next season, because he just looked like the biggest human being I'd ever seen on a football field ever in history.
I just want to. I saw something today that I have to mention at this point because of how you're talking about the size of Dylan Horton. As a Rangers fan, people might know that Joey Gallo was traded to the Yankees recently. I love
Rangers.
Joey. He's incredible. I'm glad that he's having fun in New York. This is Joey Gallo talking about playing alongside Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge. I don't like it. And specifically about Aaron Judge. He's too fucking big. He's too big. I don't understand how he's that big. I don't like to look up at people like that. I'm used to being big, and I don't really care that much about being the biggest, but he's, like, huge. And then Stanton's there. And all of a sudden, I'm, like, the skinny, tall guy now. I'm the weak guy in the outfield. That is what you talking about Dylan Horton standing next to O'Shawn Mathis just reminded me of.
It's like, very apropos.
O'Shawn Mathis, we saw him at Big 12 Media Days 2 weeks ago. The dude is huge. And here's Dylan Horton. Like, what's up?
Yeah, like looking down on him, like, oh, you're cute. It's again, like that's what's so amazing. Like everybody wants to crap on TCU's recruiting rankings, but look at the athletes that are coming to Fort Worth compared to look at the 2010 Rose Bowl team and compare them to the 2021 defensive unit. Just look at like Jerry Hughes, not a big dude. You know, like
here's the thing. Here's the thing that TCU fans don't want to accept. The 24 team would have absolutely throttled the Rose Bowl team.
Oh yeah,
like it would have been a 3-touchdown score difference.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't have there's really nothing to debate other than that.
The game has changed completely, and in 2014, this 2010 wouldn't have been able to keep up with that. Yeah,
and 2014, I don't know. I mean, I would like to see this unit play the 2014 team. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's how hyped I am right now, Melissa, about this season. Is like we've talked about the incredible corners, the incredible safeties, the linebackers. We've got Mathis and Dylan Horton and Kahari Coleman. Not to mention an incredible slew of defensive tackles coming back.
Oh, they're so good.
Right?
They're so good.
We've got like 5 deep at DT right now. This team is absolutely stacked. They've been in the program for several years. They're beyond the COVID year, which call it what you will, write it off if you want to. They've had a full spring ball. They've had a full fall camp, or they will have by the time the season starts. The hype should be at an all-time high for TCU football.
And nobody is talking about us, just how I like it.
Can't wait. Last thing before we go, did you see some Sports Illustrated intern got fired this week?
They should not have been fired.
They should have gotten a raise. They should have been hired full time because in that graphic that they made for the AP Top 20, or was it Coaches Poll? Either way, the first Top 25 poll of the year that came out, the Horns were at like 18 or something like that, and the Horns were upside down.
So good.
You just love to see it. You really just love to see it. That will do it, though, for this episode of the Frogs War podcast. I hope that you are as hyped as Melissa and I are for this upcoming football season. We are going to talk so much more about the schedule and the matchups and everything else that has to do with TCU football in this month of fall camp as we prepare for TCU to enter into the 21 season. You can like and subscribe to this podcast pretty much wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else. I don't know the other places because I'm a pretty basic human being. I'm a basic white guy. You could call me a basic bitch if you really wanted to.
How many beers have you had tonight, Jamie?
There's this thing called the Fifth Amendment. We're going to invoke that at this point.
Perfect. Good.
Anywho, you can find us wherever you find your podcasts, and we would really, truly appreciate it if you would leave a rating and a review. Melissa has some fun Texas Rangers memorabilia to give to you, should you do that in a timely manner. You can also, of course, find us on Twitter at Frogs of War, on Facebook at /Frogs of War, on Instagram. We're going to be on TikTok soon, I hear, and Melissa's really in charge of that.
Jamie dancing, she's
a generational icon. For the TikTokers. And obviously on frogswar.com where we're publishing incredible content every single day. I'll be honest, I have not been writing as much as I've wanted to lately. I am so freaking impressed by our staff and by the content that our guys and girls are putting out every single day. Like, it has just been overwhelming to see the incredible nature of the content that these folks are writing. So
it's only going to get better.
And it's only going to get better. If you haven't checked it out, I would highly encourage you to do so, because it is really incredible. And as always, and as it will be forever, it is completely free. So why wouldn't you take advantage of that? Why wouldn't you enter into conversation with the people that are in the comments there? Come on and hang out. We would love to see you hanging out with us at frogswar.com.
Amen.
With that being said, I'm Jamie Plunkett.
Melissa Treebwasser.
Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.